Howdy, good morning. This is Mackenzie Franklin from SideGame LLC here in Colorado Springs, Colorado. I want to wish you a happy Halloween on this episode of Crowdfunding. Now, that being said, we're still going to be doing the standard show. We're going to be looking at some Kickstarter games and then looking at some Kickstarter games that have delivered and kind of checking out the opinions that we have on them. Now, that being said, this week is amazing. Two of my favorite games ever are having new expansions, etc. out there. I'm so excited to talk about the games this week. So we have Unbreakable for Too Many Bones, as well as the new sequel for Hanamikoji, Geisha's Road, and then we're going to talk about the new roll and write game, Dinosaur Island Rawr and Write. So that being said, let's go ahead and jump into it. So the first game that we're going to be talking about is Too Many Bones Unbreakable. Now, Too Many Bones Unbreakable, as I said before, one of my favorite games ever. This is in my top 10 games of all time. But the Unbreakable campaign here adds some really cool new stuff. So first off, this is a expansion in the vein of Undertow, where you're going to be looking at two new heroes that have a bit more complexity than the base four that come in the main game. But you also have all sorts of new terrain tiles, baddies, and tyrants. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, in the original game here, let's go ahead and take a look at the story. In the original game here, you have a battle mat that you're going to be playing on that's kind of standard terrain. But in this one here, you're going to be having a lava battle mat. And the way they do this is with chips that actually flip back and forth. I think this is a really cool, fun mechanic. I'm excited to see what they do with it, especially when it comes to the new tyrants. So if you're unfamiliar with Too Many Bones, the way it works is you pick a fantasy character. This character has its own tech tree that's actually printed on the mats, and you're going to be using this character to go from encounter to encounter. Each encounter is played on a battle mat, and it's very tactical, because you're going to have to react to the new creatures that show up, their keywords, their abilities, their effects, and then at the end of every battle, if you're successful, you'll get to use XP points and level up your character. You can level up your core stats, your attack, your defense, or you can level up yourself on this skill tree. And each skill tree for each character is different, and you're not going to be able to explore all of them each time, so it really, really offers you a lot of replayability, lots of options, lots of choice, and that's where this game shines, is in its choices. Everything is super exciting, super fun, and I love the different dice trees that you can go through. Now, a lot of the times it is very powerful to level up those basic skills, but based on the characters you're playing, leveling up the skill dice can also be equally as important. So I really like the choices and the systems, and I love how you can specialize on different things, especially based on the player counts. This game plays fantastically at 1, 2, 4, so all of those player counts are amazing. The game does get easier the more players you get, but the more players that you get, the more variance that you can have in your gameplay, which is also really cool. You can try out strategies you may not have been able to try before. And I think that's really important when it comes to this game, is the fact that you can change up that difficulty, which also lets you change up that gameplay system. So first off, amazing game, 10 out of 10 for me. I love this game. Now, this one in particular, it's going to add some new things. So first off, baddie chips. This is going to kind of fill in the gap that Undertow left by giving us more goblins and orcs. Sorry, not goblins, trolls and orcs, as well as the new character type. I forget what it's called. It's got like this creepy looking mask, but there's some really difficult characters. And then we have two new gear locks that are very different. The first thing we have is Gale here, and Gale is an augmented gear lock. He has all these items and things that really allow him to manipulate the board, and I think that's super exciting. He's going to be very different because of all these different machines, so he's going to have lots of different tech trees that he can run on. So I really excited about that. We also have that battle mod that I was talking about, where the board itself is going to flip the tiles, so you're going to have these lava spaces, so I assume they're going to accumulate damage. I'm just excited for this. I love what they did with Undertow, adding the raft system, so I think this will be very welcome there. It's not one you're going to use all the time, but when you do, it's going to change up gameplay and be a fun time. And then the last character that's included in the box is Figment here, and Figment is a time manipulator. So he's a time traveler. He apparently got here just in time to help save the Gearlocks, and his whole thing is he can manipulate the initiative tracks and just time in general. So I like it. I like this mechanic in games. Gloomhaven's new sequel, Frosthaven, has a character that does something similar, so I'm excited to see what Figment does and how this comes into the gameplay. We got somebody joining us in the chat. Good morning, Mom Gamer. Happy Halloween. Happy to have you here this morning. And let's go ahead and continue talking about Undertow. So we also have the standard things. You've got your character references, loot cards, and if you're unfamiliar, Unbreakable here, it follows the same line of ridiculous components. Everything is plastic and neoprene, so extremely high quality. And by that being said, the price does reflect that. All we're getting is the new stuff here, and that's running us about $313, and that does not include the playmats. So speaking of those, let's go ahead and take a look at the new things that are coming with it. So let's look at the rewards. First off, you have the new content. So this is if you already have the game, this is a no-brainer. This is the thing that you want for sure. If you're already invested at this point, this is one that you're just going to go in. So this is the standard pledge. I would go for this for sure. Now the place that I'm a little on the fence on here are the actual playmats. So generally, I do like to get everything for this game because I think it's so good. But we also have these optional buys here. Now, the first one here is the gigantic playmat. Now, if you're familiar with the game, everything already is neoprene, so you don't really need this giant playmat. So it's very different. It's very different for me because usually I'm like, oh yeah, let's get the playmat. This makes sense. This one doesn't really make sense to me, which is kind of crazy. And the art on the playmat itself is not that inspiring. It's this giant forest. I'm not a big fan of this, which is kind of sad. So this is actually a playmat we're going to be passing on. It's not that exciting. Also, one thing to note, you need, if you have everything already and you have the Too Many Bones Trove Chest, make sure that you get this deluxe storage pack because you will need this to fit in all the additional content. Now we have a comment from Mom Gamer here. She asks, how many times have you played Too Many Bones? Too Many Bones is probably one of my most played games ever. Not as much as something like Marvel Champions, but it's up there. I would say at least 100 times. We got this right when it came out, and this is right when we were getting to the hobby, and we had a couple months where this would be all we've played. And then once the new expansions come out, we tend to just run through those characters, and this is such an easy solo experience. I would say I've played this at least 100 times. This game is amazing. And it still continues to hold up with its replayability. I did a video on the channel earlier ranking my favorite gear locks. I've played it. It's so good. I love this game. I can't stress it enough. I've seen a lot of reviews talking about like how it dulls for them after a couple of plays, and I can see that being a thing. But I also can see that different characters lend themselves to different amounts of variance. Particularly, I still my favorite character has to be Nugget. She's a treasure hunter, and she just pops open the game because you're able to dive into the loot. It's like having a whole set of different abilities and character effects. So I think this game is it's ripe for enjoying and living in, really. This is a game that you could play forever. And this is another great question. How hard is it to get into? The rulebook sucks. I'll be very honest with you. The rulebook is not good in the first edition, and that's what we read from. So it was very hard to get into it initially. But if you have somebody teach you or you watch a playthrough of it, it'll be smooth sailing. This is a very easy game to actually jump into. The biggest complexity is the keywords and remembering them. A lot of the times, though, there's this giant reference sheet. Most creatures are only going to have one keyword. And so it's very easy to be like, oh, this is what this effect does. And the more you play, as you can see, like hundreds of times, you'll be able to know exactly what it means. And a lot of them make sense. And they do a really good job with the keywords on integrating the core mechanics of the game into them. So it's very easy to remember them. So this is another great question. Thanks for asking. That's a great question. So that being said, make sure you get this deluxe storage if you actually have the trove chest already, or if you're getting the trove chest through this pledge, because otherwise it will not fit. Everything won't fit. So keep that in mind. That's a pretty big thing to keep in mind. You also have some really cool options here, including these extra crossover packs. You've got this pop-up book, which I think is amazing. And then you have another option of the mat. So clearly it wasn't just me who was upset with the mat and just its portrayal and everything and its art. People actually kind of rallied for this modular playmat system. That way you have this large section for your main content as well as individual player mats. So I do like this approach a little bit more, but once again, I don't think it's absolutely necessary. Everything else it's kind of there, and this artwork doesn't really do it for me. I really like the art in Too Many Bones, and I think that this looks something that's just pulled from a random fantasy game. Like, honestly, it looks like the background image from something like Shadows or Gloom of Kilforth. So it's not really bringing it out for me. So unfortunately, we're going to be passing on the mats here, but I think everything else is definitely worth picking up. More events are always good. The different promos, and if you don't have them, they have all of the different promo packs here. So this is the time to jump into this. So super excited. Once again, one of my favorite games. And let's quickly talk about the other new gear locks, because there's not just the gear locks from the two from the core. You also have 3 new gear locks. We have Carcass here, which is a hunter. He's actually going to be going around and capturing baddies and roasting them. So you're going to be hunting. This is great. I love this. So super excited to see what those mechanics turn out to be. And then we also have, this is so cool. This is Polaris. She has to do with magnetism. And we just recently unlocked a stretch goal here where we just unlocked a stretch goal here. We're actually going to be using these really cool metal polarized pieces for her magnets, so you get to send them across the board. Yeah, this is so cool. I love that idea. So just increasing that that product level, it's insane. And then lastly, we have Static. So Static is referred to as a brawler, but I would say he's more of a monk. His whole ability is he can do some big damage, but he also has to take some meditation turns. So you have some push and pull there, which I think will be very, very powerful in the higher player count games. And I'm curious to see how this management will happen during solo games. So I'm excited. All of these characters seem very fresh and unique. They obviously are from different stereotypes from the different fantasy races, but I think in this Too Many Bones world, they have not yet been touched on, and that's exciting. I think the one that I'm probably most excited for is actually the magnetism one. I like the idea of moving around different pieces on the board and seeing how they'll affect with their skill dice. The creativity that comes with this game is amazing. Now let's go to this last question here from Mom Gamer. Would you recommend an all-in for someone who you know loves the game? If someone likes this game, yes, the all-in is the way. I mean, you're getting every piece of content for a game that you know you're going to play. This is great. This is my favorite style of adventure game. I put this above a lot of campaign games. This goes right in that vein with Marvel Champions for me because it's kind of scenario based. You pick a tyrant, and then that determines the length of your game you're playing. You can be finished in an hour and a half, 2 hours. It's a very condensed, well-done experience, and you get the whole satisfaction of that level up system as you play. And so you can really dig into this as much as you see fit, as long as you have time for. So if this is one that you like, if you already know you enjoy it, jump into it. This is a game that you will never regret purchasing, and you will always play. This is one that will never leave a collection. It is one that if you put in that first time for those first couple of plays, you'll fall in love with it. So like I said before, this is in my top 5. I love this game. I will never stop playing this game. It's absolutely wonderful. This week's Kickstarter picks are amazing. So I love it. I love Unbreakable, and I think I can't belabor this anymore. I'll probably make a separate video at some point going through my top 10 games. Sorry, not my top 10 games, my 10 rated games to talk about things I love in them, and this will probably be on there. So Too Many Bones Unbreakable. This is an insta-back. Jump into it. Fantastic world, fantastic game. Now, the next game is not on Gamefound, but it's over on Kickstarter, and this is going to be the new sequel for Hanamikoji. Now, Hanamikoji is also a 10 out of 10 for me. This is a fantastic battle line style game with a wonderful, refreshing I pick, you choose mechanic. So this game is so interesting and so neat, and this sequel here is just a natural evolution of the game. So let's go ahead and take a look at it. In the original Hanamikoji, you play cards in this battle line style, and it's your goal in order to receive the most influence points on each side of this line for each different geisha. So let's go ahead and get a picture here. So here are the geisha that you'll be fighting for. Looks like there's a lot of stretch goals here. Let's scroll down. All right, here we go. So give me 1 second. Here we go. Here's how to play. All right, so you've got this line of different cards here. I think a card should go here. All right, there you go. So you've got these different lines in front of you, and on your turn, you're going to be using these action tiles. So you use an action tile, and you will use all 4 action tiles. So it's up to you when is the best time to use these. You have one that allows you to take 2 piles of cards. Your opponent picks one, you get the other, and anytime you receive a card, you put it in front of you on the appropriate line, as you can see here. So each round, you'll draw a card, use an action tile, and resolve the things. Now, this is standard. This is the same gameplay in the original Hanamikoji. And then at the end of the round, whoever has the most cards on each side of these lines is going to win that amount of... that is going to win that geisha, essentially. But here is where the tricky part comes in. Because the geishas here, they are only worth points based on where they visit. So unlike the original game, the geishas are going to move based on the values of the cards that you play. And whenever they land on their home base, their home section, they get a victory point token. So a victory point card. And they vary from 1 to 4. And so right off the bat, the geishas are not worth anything. So you may be fighting for a geisha that's not worth anything, or you may be playing a specific card in front of you or trying to get a card in front of you that will you move a geisha so that it claims victory points. Because at the end of the round, it's not guaranteed that anything that you've won is actually going to be worth anything. Now, unlike the original Hanamikoji, this has a set victory condition. You just have to win 2 out of 3 games. Once you've done that, the game is over. So it's all about manipulating your cards and your actions in order to accumulate the most points each game. So it's a bit different, but it still has that same spirit. And I think the thing that's going for it the most is the fact that it retains these 4 core action tokens. And I love that about this because the system is so satisfying. This is one of those games where you learn it and you play it, and as soon as you start playing it, you start understanding how difficult these decisions are, because you never really get to pick the cards that you put in front of you. Now, in this sequel, you actually get to do it twice. So there are 2 specific choices where you get to pick a card. So it looks like there's going to be a bit more control in this version, but most of the time, you're always giving the opponent the ability to choose the cards for you. And I think that is so interesting, so fascinating, because it really plays into the cleverness of the players, the cleverness of the decision, the cleverness of the piles that you're making. And the gameplay is so tight and straightforward that I think this one really is worth jumping into and giving time. It is only a 2-player experience, so if you don't get 2-player games played often, maybe stay away from this one. But if 2-player is the only game you play at, this is in such a good spot. It's so satisfying, it's so quick, it's so easy to learn, but the complexity and the amount of decisions you're making are hard. They're hard and fun and satisfying. And when you get good at this game, it really feels something amazing. And that might be an issue for you, is maybe you do get to such a skill level. Well, have no fear. This also includes an incredible expansion content here. And this is probably something that I'm more excited for than the sequel itself. And that is, let me see if I can find it here. These are expansion packs for the original Hanamikoji. So Hanamikoji gives you a action tiles expansion. And the coolest thing about this expansion is it's usable in the new edition, in the sequel, as well as the base game. So even if you don't even want this sequel, you can back it for these action tiles. And all they are, it's a set of 7 new action tiles. And each time you play, you're going to give 4 from each of these to each player. And boom, now you have this very amazing, solid system, but your action tiles are completely and drastically different. So it's going to be a brand new game every time. This is a no-brainer expansion to me as well. Like I said, this week is absolutely amazing, and I can't wait to get my hands on these. And the action tiles, I don't even really want to research too much into these because I want to be surprised. I want to figure out these strategies when they arrive. I want to bust them open, and I want to be tantalized, and I want to rack my brain around these strategies. I'm so excited for this Action Tiles expansion. So those are the 2 games that are on Kickstarter this week. They're both entering our library. Go check out Too Many Bones Unbreakable and Gamefound, and then Hanamikoji sequel, Geisha's Road, on Kickstarter. Amazing products. If you have any questions or any comments about these, please leave them in the comments. I'm just very excited to hear your thoughts and opinions. I am ecstatic. I'm thrilled. 2 new things for some of my favorite games ever. Amazing. So super pumped. Now, that being said, let's go ahead and move on to the next section. This is where we talk about games that we've already received into our library and I've had to play from crowdfunding. Now, this first game, well, I guess the last game we're talking about today, the only one we've received so far, we just got Western Legends, Blood Money in the mail. So we have not opened it, have not played it, so cannot talk about it this time, probably be on the next week. But this one here is Dinosaur Island, Rawr, and Write. So I recently just put out a top 10 roll and write board games on the channel, and this actually featured on the list because I'm pretty dang impressed. I think that this is a fantastic implementation of the Dinosaur Island system. I think they do a wonderful job of taking everything that existed in those and boiling it down to a very small and very tight experience. So to jump into this game, I'm just going to go ahead and explain the theme and kind of the gameplay mechanics and the sheets that you're going to be writing on. So the gameplay is very straightforward. You play as scientists, and you're going to be using dice and a worker placement style. You put them on an action space, you get whatever's on the dice face, and you take the action that you put the die on. So you're going to be using this to fill out your 2 sheets of paper. So I like games that have this because that just means that you're going to have a lot more things that you're managing. And in roll and write games, I feel like the simplicity is so there that having something a little bit more challenging is really cool to manage. Now, that's not always the case. I do like things that are simple and streamlined as well, but I like it when you have a lot of options and choices, and that's what these boards do. So with that being said, let's take a look at the boards. On the left here, you have your park itself, and you're actually going to be drawing the different shapes of the different enclosures. So on the bottom left here, you'll see that you have your enclosures for the dinosaurs. So the large ones are huge, and the small ones are, well, tiny. Go figure. So whenever you draw the first type, you're going to draw a type of, you're going to draw an enclosure for them. So here are all the velociraptors, but every time they add a velociraptor, they simply just fill in one of these. So they don't need to draw the whole pen over again. Apparently they're all pretty happy with staying in the same pen. So that's how that works. Every time you draw an enclosure, or say you get an attraction like a ride or a merch stand, you'll put them in there as well. There are also these buildings that are going to be out in the middle. There's 3 of them that have special abilities, special scoring. So you also want to kind of leave room for that. Now, this is my biggest criticism of the game, is the map itself. It doesn't really matter what these shapes are. They could literally all be squares, because you are not allowed to put buildings adjacent to each other. And that's kind of unfortunate, because really it doesn't really add for any huge interesting choices, because you're just going to push them all to the left, all to the bottom, all to the right, and leave room in the middle in case something's bigger. It's kind of unfortunate, because it takes away that fun aspect of fitting things just right and just giving you an open space. And that's my biggest criticism with the game. The map itself and creating the map is not that exciting and not that fun. But everything else surrounding the game is a joy, and I love it. So let's go ahead and talk about the next piece. So after you draft those actions, you're going to go through this large income phase, and that's where this board comes in. You start from 1 and go all the way down to 5, and you're just going to go through this process, and everybody does this at the same time, so it's a great pacing. So first off, you do your attractions. If you have any of these written in your park, you get bonuses. The merch one lets you roll extra dice and get extra bonuses. Super fun early, because you get to really just have a fun variant strategy. It's hilarious. And then you have the ride here, which will get you extra excitement, which is passive income. And then food here will give you extra money. And I really like the way the money works in this game. Every time you get cash, you can spend it on 2 things. So the first thing you can spend it on are assistants here. And the assistants have special abilities that will trigger every income phase after your attractions activate. And so you can use them on the security chef here, and that'll get you extra security. Tour guide gets you more excitement. And roads, the scientist lets you get extra scientists and allows you to build extra dinosaurs. So I think this is such a cool system, and I really like the way this works. And then these A, B, and C over here actually, just like these special buildings, relate to new assistants. So they're going to be 3 random assistants that are picked every time. You'll put them in the center, and you can use the coins to build those as well. I love this idea. I love this system, and I love the choice here. You can also spend the coins on the buildings, so the special buildings, so you can choose and pick how you see fit there. So after you activate all those attractions, you'll activate your specialist in the same way. Generally, they're going to give you just extra ways to improve your park, and then you'll go on your dino tour. And this reminds me a lot of Dinosaur World, because you're actually going to be drawing a line from your attractions. So this is where the buildings matter a little bit, but once again, the shapes really don't matter still. You're going to be using the rows that you've drawn, and you're going to be visiting different areas in a park. You want to end in an area that has one of these little stars, because if you do, that's going to give you extra points at the end. So you want to kind of like make a complete trip. For each building that you visit that you haven't visited yet, you'll get an excitement, which is down here, extra income, and then you'll put an X in the corner. So it is okay to visit the same building multiple times, but you just don't get anything for it the second time you visit. So it encourages you to create a new path and move around. So it's really solid. I really like this system, because after you do that, then you do the excitement level. However much excitement you've generated, you just get all those bonuses, and it feels so good. You get a bunch of coins, extra DNA early, which is really cool, and then eventually extra security, and you get every single bonus that you've passed over. So you're getting stronger throughout the course of the game. It feels very satisfying. After that, you'll do the death toll, and this is where your threat and security are checked, very similarly to the other Dinosaur games. If your threat's too much, you'll cross off on this track. Now, this one is really cool, though, because you get to really control what's going to be happening. Every time you cross one of these exclamation points, you choose a disaster to befall you. And each of these disasters does something interesting. So the first one here says you have to destroy one of your enclosures for dinosaurs. The second one says you have to destroy one of your exits. And there's all sorts of, oh, sorry, not one of your exits, it's 3 of your roads. And so you get to pick what your penalty is, which is kind of neat. It allows you to get some control. And this happens after the excitement happens and after the dino tour. So you could benefit from something and then immediately destroy it. So you've got some cool choices. And you could definitely be risky in this game, and it could pay off. And I think that's really cool. So you have some good choices when it comes to that. End of the game, you'll score points for everything with a little star, but that's the game in a nutshell. The big thing I want to feature, though, and the one that I really like about this game, we already talked about it. It's honestly that income strip, I think, is just really satisfying and fun. And then I really like the worker placement system. So the worker placement system is dice drafting. You'll roll dice equal to the number of players plus 1, and then those dice you'll use to take actions on this action board. And this changes based on the player count. there'll be more spaces for higher player counts. And the way it works is once you place a die on the space, you get the bonuses on it and the effect of the space, but you also will get the opportunity to take actions that people have already used. But in order to do that, it depends on the threat of the dice. So a lot of these dice are going to have these security threat symbols on them, those little dots. Each time you go over somebody else's die that has those, then you have to gain that much threat. And this is a very interesting situation because you could be drafting a dice first, take a weaker bonus, and place it somewhere with like 3 threat on it just to prevent other players from taking an action. And I really like that system. I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think it's really cool for the game. You can take as much threat as you want to do the actions you want, but you have to be ready to suffer the consequences. And I love this system. It just makes so much sense. And I'm excited to play more of this. I like it. The solo mode is also very good. It uses an AI card system, and it also offers new objectives. So a little bit more interesting scoring in the solo mode. And it's really well done with the way the AI works. So there's a lot to love about the roll and write version of this. My other ding about the game, though, has to do with some of the components. It comes with these little pencils as well as these little dino erasers in the game, and I think they're pretty awful. So I would not recommend you use those. Get yourself a mechanical pencil because the erasers are pretty bad. They're going to smudge things usually. They take a long time. It's one of those issues. I'm sure you've used a pencil before that has an awful eraser, and sometimes you rip the sheet. This one's not as hard as those, but it feels like that where you're just not getting anywhere with it. Just get yourself a stack of mechanical pencils and throw them in here. But that's Dinosaur Island Rawr and Write. Surprisingly, one that I enjoy. I love the way that the income systems work. And it's a game that's fun. I really like this version. I said before in our top 10 roll and writes, this is better to me than the original 2 Dinosaur Island games. I think it's really solid. It gets me that exact same feeling, but it's a bit more satisfying, a bit more streamlined. And I like the variance that comes from this. In the base game, the variance comes from the different tiles that you can draft, the technology tiles for your lab, and the different assistants that come out. But in this one, you get kind of that similar feeling, the variance of those special buildings, the variance of the new lab assistants in a tighter, cleaner package with a lot less fiddliness. This is one that I'm enjoying. That is Dinosaur Island Rawr and Write. And those are everything that we've been talking about this week. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I'll leave the chat open a little bit if you have any questions or comments or anything that you'd like to share. I'd love to hear what you think. But thank you so much for watching and being here. Are there any games that you're super excited for? Anything that I didn't cover on this week's crowdfunding that you would really, really like to see in a future one? Please let me know down in the comments below. So other cool Kickstarter games that we are getting for sure are Western Legends Blood Money. The new role player stuff is super exciting. Very pumped to try out the new Cartographer's Heroes as well as Role Player Adventures. We also have not a Kickstarter, but we have Mad Titan Shadow delivering, so super excited for that. One of my favorite games ever, Marvel Champions, getting that stuff. So excited to try that one. And then, try to think of anything else Kickstarter related. I think that this month is pretty busy when it comes to deliveries, and I don't think it's actually going to be that bad for our wallet, at least for funding purposes. So I think it's just Unbreakable and Geisha's Road right now. Who knows? Yeah, nothing in particular here. That being said, it is our Halloween episode. So if any of you are dressing up for Halloween, I'd love to hear your Halloween costumes down in the comments, or if you'd like to share them here on the live stream. Love to hear what you're doing if you have any plans. Yesterday, I was Crutchy from the Newsies. So pretty hilarious. I love it. I think it's just so funny. It really sprung from that. There's a College Humor Batman sketch that talks about it. I think it's so funny. It just cracks me up. I can only picture Clark Kent as Crutchy now from Newsies. So really funny. I think it's great. So that was my costume yesterday. Yeah. So we'll leave it up for another couple seconds here, and then we'll log off. All right. So that is the show. That is crowdfunding for this week. I just want to give another big thank you for being here and watching this morning. And thanks again to Mom Gamer for being here. She's one of my Patreons. Super appreciate the support. And thank you so much for commenting. I'd love to answer your questions. And I'm excited. And I hope that you get to try Too Many Bones soon if you haven't already, or that you can get it for someone who loves it. So amazing game. These are two 10 out of 10s. The one I'm most excited for, oh man, that's really hard. I'm gonna have to give it to Unbreakable. I think Unbreakable definitely gets my most excited game. It's a game that I already love, and one that I know that as soon as it arrives, I can play it immediately because of that solo option, and then I can get this played countless number of times. Geisha's Road does have that restrictiveness of only being a 2-player game, so that you have to keep in mind, but it's one of the best 2-player experiences ever. So I love both these games. I'm super excited to try more. But thank you so much for watching Side Game Strong. Have a happy Halloween.